welcome back to The Explainer. So today we're taking a really deep, structured dive into financial statement analysis. Specifically, we're looking at investor and market valuation ratios. Now, our goal today is pretty straightforward, but it's ambitious. We want to completely demystify these metrics, so you walk away with a rock-solid, exam-ready understanding of how to actually analyze a stock's true value. Whether you're an aspiring CPA, a budding financial analyst, or just someone wanting to manage their own portfolio a bit better, we are going to build your ultimate investor's toolkit today.
But before we get totally bogged down in complex formulas and massive balance sheets, I want you to think about just a single $1 bill. It might actually surprise you, but all of these really intimidating, complex valuation metrics you see constantly floating around the financial press, they often just boil down to one really simple, anchoring question. What are investors actually willing to pay for just one single dollar of a company's earnings? I want you to keep that $1 bill right in your mind's eye, because it's going to be our anchor, our North Star throughout this whole explainer.
So here is the toolkit we're building today. 1. Valuing earnings with a PE ratio. 2. The core, which is earnings per share. 3. Sharing profits using dividend ratios. And 4. The asset floor, otherwise known as book value. All right, let's jump into part 1. Valuing earnings, the PE ratio. So the PE ratio measures the exact amount that investors are currently willing to pay for one single dollar of a company's earnings. This ratio is pretty much universally used as the primary indicator to figure out the affordability of a share of stock. Like, let's say a company's stock is trading at $50 and they earn $1 per share. Well, that means investors are paying $50 for every $1 of that company's earnings. Simple enough, right? But here's where it gets tricky. Does a high PE ratio automatically mean a security is overpriced? It is so incredibly tempting to just say yes and move on, but that is a massive trap. While a high PE might suggest a stock is overvalued and you should run away and sell, it could also represent the market's highly optimistic assessment of that company's future growth. On the flip side, a low PE might mean you found a phenomenal, underpriced value stock, or could just mean the company is really struggling. The absolute main takeaway here is that a PE ratio should always invite further analysis. It should never be an immediate, knee-jerk conclusion. Moving right along to section 2, the core, earnings per share, or EPS. You see, earnings per share is the essential, unavoidable denominator in that PE calculation we just looked at. It measures the current period earnings that can be directly linked to one single share of a corporation's common stock. And standard setters in accounting are actually super strict about exactly how you calculate this number. Why? Well, because if you hold common stock, this is literally your primary profitability ratio. It tells you the exact earning power of your specific little piece of the company pie. But here's where the application gets really fascinating. These ratios, they don't exist in a vacuum. Context is literally everything. So let's run through some practical mini scenarios just to show why these numbers look completely different depending on the actual business model we're dealing with. So the numbers tell a different story depending on who or what we're looking at. Take a growth company. We'd absolutely expect them to have a low payout ratio. Why? Because instead of handing cash back to the shareholders, they are aggressively reinvesting all those earnings straight back into expansion. Next, think about a value stock. That's usually identified by a heavily low PE ratio, which signals to the market, hey, there's some underpriced potential here. And finally, consider an income-oriented investor. They honestly don't care as much about rapid, explosive expansion. They're hunting for a high dividend yield. They're focusing intensely on the cash return relative to the market price they paid. Which brings us perfectly to section 3, sharing profits through dividend ratios. Now, understanding this side-by-side comparison is absolutely crucial. The dividend payout ratio looks internally. It measures the portion of available earnings the company actually handed out to its shareholders. It's basically about how they slice up the profit pie. Conversely, the dividend yield ratio looks externally. It measures the percentage of the share's actual market price that was returned as dividends. So one tells you about the management's internal distribution strategy, and the other tells you about your actual cash return relative to the price you paid on the open market. All right, part 4, the asset floor, book value per common share. Think of book value per common share as the absolute baseline floor of a company's worth. By strict definition, it's the amount of net assets recorded at their historical carrying amounts on the books that would be given to the common shareholders if the company essentially packed it up and went into liquidation right now. You calculate it by taking the net assets available to shareholders and literally just dividing it by the number of shares outstanding. It is a strictly historical, accounting-based snapshot.
Okay, pause. Whenever the topic of book value comes up, alarm bells should immediately start flashing in your head. Whether you're a working analyst or you're sitting for your CPA exam, you are entering a zone absolutely littered with conceptual traps. Because here is the most dangerous trap of them all. You must explicitly realize that book value does not equal market value. Book value is based solely on historically recorded accounting amounts. It is strictly what happened in the past. Market value, though, that dynamically prices in a company's future earnings potential. The fundamental, massive limitation of book value is that it completely and utterly ignores what the business might actually be capable of earning tomorrow. So let's rapidly fire off a quick checklist of the top conceptual mistakes we covered today just to make sure your understanding is completely bulletproof. First, treating book value as market value. Just don't do it. Second, forgetting that book value totally ignores a company's future potential. Third, casually assuming a high PE automatically means a stock is overpriced without digging deeper. And fourth, ignoring the fact that the basic PE calculation generally relies on historic net income, which, could include weird non-recurring items and might not actually reflect future earning prospects at all. And that brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought to wrap up today's explainer. We've seen that book value is strictly a historical accounting metric, right? And even the PE ratio, our ultimate market gauge, fundamentally relies on historic earnings. So, if these core valuation tools lean so heavily on looking in the rearview mirror, how do we actually use them to accurately predict future performance? It's really the great challenge of financial statement analysis, and it highlights exactly why mastering these foundational basics is just your first step toward advanced, predictive modeling. Keep analyzing, keep questioning the numbers, and I will see you in the next explainer.